Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am here today with a very, very special person to me, my very own mother, Miriam Sternberg. And I'm so grateful, Mommy, that you joined me today. My mother is an incredible person. You're going to hear a little bit more about that today. But my mother had quite a unique upbringing. We really enjoyed hearing all her stories growing up about her childhood, some sad, some funny. And I'm so excited to share her with all of you. So thank you, Mommy, for joining us today.
My pleasure and honor.
Okay. So my mother grew up in the former Soviet Union. And Mommy, could you share with everyone what it was like growing up in the Soviet Union as a Jewish person?
Well, the problem was that I didn't know that I was Jewish until a certain age. I actually, my parents didn't speak to me about me being Jewish at all until a certain age. And I actually had an incident in kindergarten where another child wanted a toy that I was playing with, and that child was calling me Zhidovka, which means a dirty Jew, and it really aggravated me, and I punched him in his face, and I got into trouble, and I was called into principal's office.
I'd like to interject to say that my mother is like the most non-violent person ever. So this is very out of character.
Yeah, no, I was a goody-goody. I never hurt anybody, but that was like beyond something that I could tolerate, especially the fact that I had no idea that I was Jewish. So my parents and I went to the principal's office, and because of my actions with this particular boy. And then my father asked me in front of a principal, why did I do what I did? And I said, well, he called me Zhidovka, and I'm not even Jewish. And my father said, no, but you are Jewish. And I actually said to him, Papa, but what's Jewish about me? I don't want to be Jewish. And my father realized that I had no idea what it means to be Jewish. And from then on, he started learning in a special Ulpan underground program where he was learning Hebrew and about Judaism. And at that point, he decided that he's going to be going to apply for exit visa from Russia to Israel.
So how did you feel? Like, you find out you're Jewish, you think Jewish, I assume you thought it was a very dirty word if it caused you to punch someone in the face.
Right. Well,
So were you like disgusted with yourself to know that you were something that was like a pejorative?
I didn't know. Yeah, I felt that why did I have to be born Jewish? And what my father worked on a regular basis, he took me to the 30-minute, an hour walk every single day, and taught me what it means to be Jewish and a pride of being Jewish. And I think this was fundamentals that I've gotten before I came to Israel and helped me to make decisions that I made later on in life.
So was this allowed? Like, was your father allowed to teach you about being Jewish?
No. He could have he could have gotten arrested and sent to Siberia for something like that. But he did it for me. Wow. He did it because he loved me and he wanted me to grow up Jewish. And my father was the greatest person I ever met in my life.
My grandfather, Dad, as I called him, was a very, very special person. I think we all miss him a lot.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
So you started learning about being Jewish, which was against the law. Was there ever a time where you really, were concerned about your safety, that you were nervous for your life or for your safety, or?
Okay, so definitely, first of all, I always felt like I lived a double life. On the outside, I pretended to not to be Jewish. On the inside, I was learning and constantly about what it means to be Jewish. Secondly, I had an incident when my father was arrested at a certain point when he and other refuseniks got together and went to the parliament of Russia, and they basically announced that they're doing a hunger strike in protest for intention of Russian government to murder without trial the Jews who hijacked the plane to escape to Israel because they were not allowed to leave to Israel. And at that point, my father got arrested and taken to KGB headquarters. Meanwhile, I was home alone. I was 10 years old, and I heard a knock at the door, front door, and I opened the door, and there was two huge Russian bulldogs. And they said, basically, we are from KGB, and we want to ask you some questions. And so they asked me a lot of questions about who's coming, what my parents are doing. They searched the house for Jewish books, which they did not find, and that were basically on a bookshelf.
How old were you when this happened again?
10.
Oh my gosh, that must have been terrible.
And then they did the search. They did the house search to see what they can find. They didn't find anything, but it was pretty scary at the age of 10.
Was there anything to find? Was there any books, Jewish books in your house?
There were books standing on the bookshelf right in front of them, and they did not see it. That was a huge, incredible miracle that Hashem done. But for us, and but it was a very scary experience, to be interrogated basically by KGB at the age of 10. I think that was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life.
So let's go back. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just want to say one more thing. My parents were not learning by themselves. There were other people that were coming to our home. I had no idea that at that point that my house was bugged, and there was a surveillance, who's coming, who's going, or whatever it is. And I didn't want to give up anybody's names, and it was at the age of 10 to keep secrets of that on that level was very difficult.
Wow. And you found out later that your house was being bugged?
Yes. I had a best friend, Andre, and him and his father came to say goodbye to us right before we went to the airport to our flight leaving Russia. And Andre's father said to my father, and I was standing right there, Boris, I want to tell you, you always thought that I was an engineer, but really I worked for KGB. And my son and I bugged your house, and we had a surveillance of your house through the whole period.
Wow. Can
you imagine your best friend doing that to you? Wow. It was like the feeling, even it's so many years later, it's so painful.
Wow.
It's so painful. This Andre was nursed by my mother. We were like brother and sisters.
Wow.
His mother did not have breast milk, and there was no formula those days. So the people used to hire people who did have milk to be nursed. So my mother nursed him,
Right.
and we were like always playing together, hanging out together. Like we lived right, our houses were right behind each other. So that was
Wow.
extremely, extremely painful.
Wow. So tell me about your father. What was he doing in Russia prior to when you left?
Okay. My father was the head of leukemia research at Cancer Institute of Moscow. He was a very famous scientist. He was famous in Russia, and he was famous all over the world. He had developed the initial diagnosis for leukemia, especially in children. He was a very, 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 very known professor who was well respected by everybody.
So what was it like, someone who had, I assume many, many years in schooling, which I assume wasn't easy being a Jewish person, and then trying to work his way up the ladder as a scientist, also as a Jew, and finally getting there and then deciding to leave? Like what was it that made him want to he spent his whole career, I don't even know, you could tell me how many years he spent trying to get to where he was, and then to decide to pick up and leave, and knowing that he may never get to where he was in his career in another country?
So let me tell you a little story. As soon as my father submitted documents for exit, for a visa to leave Russia, the director of Institute of Cancer called him in, and she asked him, Dr. Chechik, why are you doing this? You're famous, well-known scientist. You have a position that most Jews cannot achieve. Why are you doing this? So my father said to her, you know what? You have a daughter, and I have a daughter. Your daughter is raised as a Russian. She knows Russian culture. She knows Russian history, Russian religion. My daughter is a Jew, and she doesn't know anything what it means to be a Jew.
Wow.
And I want my daughter to grow up Jewish. And so she said, but what are you going to do in Israel? And my father said, even if I have to clean the streets of Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv, but my daughter will grow up Jewish, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm willing to give up everything for my daughter.
Wow. Mommy, it's so beautiful because all of us 7 children and close to 30 grandchildren. I even know how many there are now. I've lost track.
28.
28. Okay. I guess you know.
Yeah, I know.
Jewish grandchildren living Jewish lives, 4 of them in Israel, 4 of your children in Israel, 3 of them in America. Like all of us really owe everything to Dada making that decision, that really crazy, scary decision to pick up and give you that opportunity to live a Jewish life.
Absolutely. He was an incredible individual and an amazing father. And I think, in his cause, all my children and grandchildren will grow up to be proud Jews, proud to be Jewish, and close to Hashem.
Wow. So you left Israel, right? Were you allowed to take your belongings with you?
We all were able to take one little suitcase, and that's it. We left everything. Everybody, and no money, nothing. Wow. It was crazy. It was crazy.
And then you went to Israel.
Well, we made a stop in Austria because there were no direct flights, and then I came to Israel. Yeah.
And then how did your life change when you came to Israel?
Well, my father felt that I should go to a religious school in Israel, and he sent me to a religious school. It was an adjustment for me, but it was an incredible, incredible school and incredible, incredible principal who told me on the first day I walked him through the school doors, Miriam, I'm here for you, and all my staff are here for you. My door is always open, and I felt like at home.
Wow.
I really, really felt at home.
And that must have been a very big departure from the way you were treated when you were in Russia.
Absolutely, yes. For 4 years, I had Alexandra Ivanovna, who used to hit me over my head. There were only 2 Jewish kids in my class, and it was really tough. Really,
Wow.
really tough.
So you went to this Jewish school. You were treated kindly for the first time. Did it change the way that you lived your life?
Absolutely. Slowly and surely, I started observing one thing at a time and different mitzvahs. And thank God, it was a years of growth. And thank God at this point, I'm married, have a beautiful Jewish family and observant family. And it's just, and I have you. Baruch Hashem.
Wow. It's really, I mean, I've heard all these stories before, obviously, but, every time I hear these stories, it's so amazing to think about like what brought me here today, all this sacrifice, all the sacrifices that Dada made and Baba needed to leave, and, you adjusting to, I don't know, I assume you didn't know much Hebrew when you got to Israel.
No, not at all. I did not know any Hebrew. I knew one word, shalom. That's it.
Learning a new language, adjusting, making these changes in your life, right? Coming from a country where you weren't even allowed to talk about being Jewish to living an observant life, and to where you are today as an American businesswoman, a mother of 7, a grandchildren of 28. It's so beautiful to think about all the things that brought you here and all the sacrifice that brought you here. And you know what else it makes me think of? It makes me think about choices, because, our choices really define who we are, but they don't just define who we are, they define who our descendants are. So Dad's choice didn't just affect him, it affected you, affected me, and it affects my children. Who we are today is all because of the choices that you guys made.
That's right. That's right. Anyways, he was a very brave person who made the right choices and who loved me. And, when you guys were born, he adored you. And he was actually extremely, extremely happy that he made the choices that he did. Every one of you, every one of my children was a beautiful diamond, as he used to call it.
He definitely had a lot of love for especially his daughter, his one and only.
You know what? Even though he's not with us anymore, I feel his love so much with.
Wow.
Constantly.
Well, you shared a lot today. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, but this is a little bit about my mother and where she's from and some of the challenges that she went through, what brought her here today. But I would like you to share with our listeners, what is one message that you would like them to take away from our conversation today?
Well, there are 2 messages, actually. One is making the right choices that impact your life.
Mm-hmm.
And number 2, value the freedom you have to be a Jew. Value the freedom to get a Jewish education. Because don't take it for granted. Mm-hmm. It was so hard. I have very vivid memories how secretly my parents used to learn underground, in our apartment. You can't take it for granted. It's such a blessing that the United States of America, you could do it. And so use that opportunity and grow and develop as Jews.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful message, for sharing your story. Really, I think all that Spark is today, the fact that Spark exists is really an attribution to you, the choices you made, the choices Dada made. And I love you so much and really appreciate you coming on today to share your story.
My pleasure. Love you so much too, gorgeous.
Thank you everyone for joining us, and have a beautiful evening.